What's going on, guys? This is Aaron from Departures Capital. We're here with Kyle Floyd, CEO of VOX Royalties. Nice to have you back, Kyle. How are you today?
Thanks, Aaron. Doing fantastic. Glad to be on.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to have you back. You guys have been up to a lot of things. So, can you start by giving us an update on VOX, telling us everything you've been up to over the last couple of months? I know it's been pretty busy.
Yeah, it's been a tremendously busy few months for VOX. Excited today. We had an announcement that we pushed out to the market. It's really recapping the results from some of the operating partners that are running the projects that we have royalties over. And just to refresh your audience, we're a royalty acquisition company. So we buy what is essentially top line interest in the revenue produced or will inevitably be produced from mining companies all over the world. And we're enabled by our intellectual property advantage and our capability in sourcing these deals at really good value for our shareholders. And so we've seen a tremendous amount of growth in the portfolio. These are situations where VOX and our shareholders are not having to put capital out to get these benefits. And in the backdrop of really heavy inflation, where you're seeing mining companies have very significant cost increases across the board, not just for what they're going to have to do now to continue to develop the asset, but what they're going to eventually face in terms of rising costs when they're in production as well. So across the board, VOX is very well positioned. That was by design. Our business model and our business plan was to go execute and bring in these royalties that are forming what we announced today, which is really productive growth for VOX and our shareholders with no additional capital out. So breaking that down, Aaron, for the audience and the viewership a little bit further, two major, I would say, buckets of advancements that we announced today. A couple were exploration results. So Pedra Branca, which is the largest developing platinum group metals project in South America, they announced that they doubled the resource size over the last 2 years. So from where we bought that royalty a couple of years ago to where it stands now, that resource size has doubled. And again, no price to VOX, no cost to VOX. And so that's very, very significant. We also had another project called Bulgaria that announced 113% increase in its resource. And that was just done over the last 6 to 9 months. And again, we acquired these royalties at fantastic prices. And then another exploration update, which again, I think really reinforces the value of VOX for our shareholders and what we go about creating within our business, is there was a maiden discovery that announced its initial resource or its maiden resource of over 200,000 ounces at Puzzle North. And that's pretty much all in Western Australia. So near mill, near infrastructure, can be something that can be fast-tracked into production. So really, those exploration updates are hugely significant. Maiden resource, so exploration turning into something very tangible, and then the doubling of the size of pretty large resources for us, especially in the case of Pedra Branca, which is operated by Oleary, so very significant. And then we also announced two major development milestones. So the biggest of which is we own a producing royalty over Janet Ivy. Cision's the operator. They came out and confirmed that the $400 million expansion is well underway and guided towards second half of this year being revenue realized from the expansion project, which is hugely beneficial to VOX and our shareholders. That should increase the applicable royalty revenue from that project by over 5 times. And then Ashburton, which is a 1.6 million ounce resource that's targeting, based on operator guidance, 2 to 3 million ounces in ultimate size, announced that they've had very positive metallurgical work done and are advancing a scoping study to eventually bring this project back into production. Again, that was a previous producer. So kind of a mouthful, a lot to digest, but all in all, tremendous growth, de-risking, and exciting upside that VOX is realizing for its shareholders. Again, not exposed to the rising cost pressures. We're not diluted by not putting capital in. So when you're trying to figure out, well, what's the return to VOX? When you're not putting any money in, it's pretty significant.
Yeah, I think you guys got the perfect business model for this environment. So, despite the volatility in the markets, VOX's stock has really performed well. How are you able to achieve such great performance, or just some insight? Why do you think, it's done so well versus other companies, in the same sector like the mining business that haven't performed as well as VOX?
Well, I think number one is we're executing our business model and the business plan very, very well. What we're telling investors we're going to do, we execute, and we achieve, and we continue to do that systematically and repeatedly, really like nobody else in the industry. We're finding really good royalties at really good value. We have a specific advantage business model and competitive advantage that allow us to accomplish that for our shareholders. And so that means I think there's a little bit less volatility in how we go about our business. We're creating the same amount of upside with a lot less downside, because we're able to find good royalties where our mining engineers and our geologists really like these projects. And we're using that capability along with our intellectual property that's created a systematic and repeatable business that finds value and creates value within our portfolio for our shareholders. Complementing that, I think, is the market is really waking up to commodities, and your generalist investor population is saying, hey, inflation's here. It's probably not going anywhere for a while. Commodities have outperformed, from our data, the last 9 inflationary regimes. Commodities have been one of the best performers, if not the best performing asset class. So where am I putting capital in this particular market cycle? And then within that, as a segment within commodities, the royalty companies have really outperformed. And a lot of it has to do with not being exposed to those inflationary cost pressures, getting the benefit of higher metal prices compounded, but not being exposed to cost pressures. So I think our ability to execute, be reliable for our shareholders, and then the market really understanding that companies like VOX are uniquely positioned to be advantaged, to be an advantaged asset class.
No, that's awesome. The stocks definitely performed very well. So recently, VOX announced record preliminary revenue for 2021. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? I know that we were talking before about, your record revenue numbers. How are you feeling for this year?
Look, we can't get into talking too much going forward, but what I can talk about is what we achieved in 2021, which was record preliminary revenue. We'll come out with our fourth quarter financials here soon. But the trajectory of the business is fantastic. Again, if you really digest the announcements that we came out with today, the growth within the portfolio, we call the organic growth. So that's not us putting another dollar out to go acquire another royalty. That is just purely what is in the portfolio today. What is that creating in terms of value for VOX shareholders is tremendous. And we're seeing the momentum continue to pick up. This buoyancy in commodity prices is so very powerful for a royalty business model where we get all the advantages of new drilling, new resources, which we're seeing in our update today, expanded production profiles, and then the continued de-risking of assets with higher metal prices. It's just tremendous for our portfolio. It's hard to understate just how productive the current market climate is for a royalty company like VOX. So as you continue to project out our ability to continue to be able to deliver growth within the portfolio, find new acquisitions at very good value over interesting and frankly compelling projects, I think is unmatched in the industry. So for investors looking for where to play the current market and where to get the right kind of exposure, I think VOX is a really good company to do some further work on.
Yeah, it's amazing, all the opportunities for value creation as opposed to like your traditional business model. It's quite interesting. So VOX announced they've submitted an application for Nasdaq Uplisting. This is obviously very exciting. I've seen companies go through this process, and obviously, hopefully, everything pans out and it works, because it'll be a big milestone. But how do you feel about this? And can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, it's something we're really excited about, Aaron. The reality is, behind the scenes, our management team and our board has been doing an extensive review process on a secondary listing. And the NASDAQ was the ultimate decision, but it really made sense kind of in all material respects. It is the most liquid exchange on the planet, number one. Number two, most of our comparable companies have achieved a dual listing in the US. It's certainly the biggest audience of investors worldwide. And they saw a dramatic increase in the liquidity. The two precedent companies that we use to benchmark saw on average a 750% increase in their volume. And it was one of the most productive times in their share price that they realized as a business for their shareholders. So we're really excited about this. We should achieve this major milestone for our business in June. And we believe that this is going to help us close the gap. We're trading at what from kind of all objective data points is a discount to our closest comps in the market in terms of relative valuation. We think this is going to help us close that gap and have a big part of continuing to increase the value for our shareholders.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited for you guys, and we'll definitely have to have you back on, hopefully, to celebrate that. So, what are some of the major catalysts that shareholders and investors should be looking out for in the coming months?
So excitingly, we have a couple projects that we expect to be achieving commercial production this year. So we will continue to update the market on those advancements. And really, as you look at our business over 2022, over 2023, we expect really somewhere between 5 and 8 additional projects to come online and be in production. And so it's that very tangible growth that we're achieving in producing asset count. And then that obviously translates into revenue for our business. And then ultimately, we believe within the portfolio, there's 20 to 30 projects that are likely to be in production over what I would call, a reasonable time period. So it's really an exciting time for shareholders. We're a high growth business, yet we're trading at great value for where we stand today. And we're going to continue executing the business model.
Oh, that's great to see. So finally, as we know, commodities are heating up. It seems like we're in a bull market for commodities. What are your thoughts on the market? Obviously, fundamentals and going forward. Do you see this being like a short-term thing or a long-term bull market? What are your thoughts on the market?
Well, the only probably segment of the market that I can touch on with some degree of background and insight that's, I guess, worth talking about would be commodities. And look, I believe the cycles play out. They're usually multi-year cycles. It certainly seems from all of our discussions with industry insiders that are, either operating metal trading platforms or miners themselves or the buyers of metals. It certainly seems like the expectation is for metal prices to continue going higher and for that to be the case for some time to come. So I know from what it takes in just our experience in executing the VOX business plan and really doing diligence on mining companies and being involved in this market for so long now, that the reality is it's very, very hard to bring on new mines these days, anywhere in the world. It's difficult. We probably have the best exposure and the best jurisdiction for that, which is Western Australia. But that being said, globally, it is a difficult challenge to bring mines online. So the supply is not going to increase as much as the price, I believe, you would call that inelastic in economics, but supply is relatively inelastic for most of these metals. And so I think prices will continue to be robust, and that will continue to make the commodity sector, the miners, and the royalty companies, who I believe are the most advantaged in this cycle, stand out and probably outperform.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it's going to continue, and this is not just going to be a short-term thing. There's so many things going on. So finally, where's the best place for investors to find out more information about the company, or where should they go?
So voxroyalty.com, that's the website. We're on all the typical social media channels. And then for email, any questions, ir@voxroyalty.com. I'm on there quite often answering questions. So we're always happy to engage with any investors out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all those updates, Kyle. I know you guys are busy. We'll have to have you back on, hopefully, for some celebrations later or something along the lines of that. So have a great day.
Thanks, Aaron. That'd be my pleasure.
If you like these videos, kindly hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications. Drop us a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you. And finally, always remember, Departures Capital is for information, education, and entertainment purposes only. Don't buy or sell a stock because you heard it on here. Buy or sell a stock because you've done your research, you've done your thorough due diligence, and you're making your own personal investment decisions for yourself. This video is not financial advice. Furthermore, this video may or may not have been sponsored by the companies that we've profiled within this video, and we may or may not own shares of any of the profiled companies in this video. If you want to know the full disclosure details, check the description down below, along with thoroughly reading our disclaimer. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I look forward to seeing you in our next video.